It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is What Made the Cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Trajan Wealth brings you this portion of the program. For all your trusted local needs in retirement, it is Trajan Wealth, TRAJAN Wealth.com is Trajan Wealth. He is Jon Wilner. He joins us on the program. Jon, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
We're still scratching our heads on how to figure out this college football landscape. It's early. When do you think, and you're an AP voter, but when do you think the reality is of what we find out who teams are really during a season?
Usually first week or two of October, I feel like you can kind of get a handle on it. It's so hard the first, half of September, first 3 weeks of September, because the schedules are imbalanced, right?
Yeah.
You got a Penn State. They've played Nevada and Florida International, right? Meanwhile, Notre Dame's played A&M and Miami. Some teams have played 4 games. Some have played 2. You got the byes to consider. It's really hard. Once conference play starts, and that's a little bit different for everybody, but by, first, second week of October, I think you usually get a feel for who's, going to be in the top half of the conference races.
After 3 weeks nationally, who's been the biggest surprise to you and the biggest disappointment?
Biggest surprise? Oh boy, good question. Georgia Tech would be
It's a good one.
Close. Vanderbilt, both those teams had good seasons last year, and Georgia Tech obviously played that, 8 overtime game against Georgia. But, they just beat Clemson, and they went to Colorado and beat the Buffs. Vanderbilt looks good, too. So those would be 2 of them. I don't think I expected Florida State to be as good, at least as they looked against Alabama. Downside surprises, Clemson a little bit, to be honest. Certainly Georgia Tech and LSU are good, but they haven't been nearly as elite as I thought. Arch Manning has been a little bit of disappointment, in terms of a specific player. He had tons of hype, obviously. But, boy, he just doesn't look like – not only doesn't look comfortable, but, man, his mechanics are bad, bad. So those would be a couple. I think Colorado is going to be not as good as a lot of people thought. And you do wonder about Deion's, the health situation. So those would be a few, but you could also list 10 or 12 in each category.
Yeah. If you see these teams that, the top 25 always gives us, a crazy kind of look at it. And Clemson, I know, is high on your board. I know you had them. I think you put them in the top at number 1 in your top 25. But what is it that they are lacking? Like when you look at Clemson and you go, okay, this was a team that, was supposed to kick the trend of not buying into the NIL stuff or the transfer portal stuff that everybody else was, but still able to put together some massive talent. Is this like more of a wake-up call for Dabo Swinney, or do you think it's one of those things where it's just the luck of how bad or how tough their schedule was at the front end here?
Well, it has been tough. I had Clemson as my preseason number 1 because I thought they were going to win the national championship. And they still might. We'll see. But certainly, LSU is clearly really good. And the Georgia Tech game, they lost on a field goal in the last second, right? But I think Kate Klubnik has not been as sharp as I had expected, for sure. They were without their best receiver for the LSU game. That hurt. But they certainly have not been, the dominant force on defense that I was expecting. I mean, they've got 3 or 4 guys that are supposed to be first, second day picks in the NFL draft. And they had a hard time stopping Georgia Tech's running game. And that was a surprise to me.
Big 12. I think we all figured it's going to be a crazy race. We've already seen some league games already. What's your takeaway so far, and what you're seeing in the Big 12?
Big 12 is very Big 12. There's going to be 2 or 3 teams that are upside surprises and 2 or 3 that are downside disappointments. It's the nature of the league. It's not having any Georgias or Ohio States in the conference. and that's what makes it fun to me. So far, Arizona has been better than I expected. Kansas State has been worse than I expected. I have no idea about BYU, to be honest. They played, Stanford's kind of a cupcake, so they played 2 cupcakes. I really don't know how good they're going to be, and I'm not sure we're going to get an answer this week, to be honest. Utah looks very good, which you thought was going to be the case, although, I don't know, the offense, if I'm a Utah fan, I'd be a little bit concerned about the offense I saw in the first half against Wyoming, going up against Texas Tech this weekend, but they should be good. We'll see about BYU, and the rest of the Big 12 is just mayhem.
Well, and I don't know if that means that they're any good as a conference, to be honest, because of how when you say mayhem and the parity, it's not to say, but I will say, too, I think the SEC is a little bit nervous, not because of the Big 12, but because they don't have right now the top part of the conference that has always been so dominant doesn't feel as dominant. And what you don't want is for everybody to be pretty good in any conference.
That's true. It's possible that Georgia is really, really good. The one thing I will say is that really at this point, the only metric I think that is valid is how the power conferences are doing against each other, right? There's not that many games, but that does give us some kind of insight. And the Big 12's actually done pretty well. Big 12 is 6-6 against the ACC, Big 10, and SEC. So that's the Big Ten is also, they're 5-5 in those kind of matchups. So the Big 12 is holding its own. The SEC is 10-2. Alabama's lost to Florida State, and Texas has lost to Ohio State on the first day. They have won 10 games against the other 3 conferences since then. They have beaten everybody's doors off. And that includes Mississippi State, picked last in the SEC, beat ASU, defending Big 12 champs. Now, I think Mississippi State's better this year than they were, and I don't know if ASU is quite as good, but that gives you an idea of how deep the SEC is, and that performance is going to play a role when it comes to picking the playoff teams.
A lot of eyeballs are going to be on Salt Lake City this weekend as the Utes host Texas Tech, 16 versus 17. Big noon kickoff. It's going to be a lot of hype. We had this circled on the calendar coming into the season as a game that could set the tone for the entire Big 12. What are your thoughts on this game, and how do you see it going?
Yeah, it certainly is potentially a very big game. I do think, you kind of go back to last year, and I want to say it was this week last year Utah went to Oklahoma State for what we thought was going to be a defining game, and look what happened. So you never know, but it certainly seems like both Utah and Texas Tech are going to be in the race to the end. I don't think Texas Tech is going to be, rattled by the environment at Rice-Eccles. Baron Morton is a very experienced quarterback, and he's got guys out of the transfer portal who can really make plays. So I'm going to be curious how Utah's defense holds up on the back end against, Texas Tech's passing game, and a lot of that will depend on how much pressure the Utes can generate. On the other side, we'll see about Devin Dampier throwing the ball down the field accurately. That, to me, that was what stood out in the first half against Wyoming is, they just didn't seem to be stretching the field much. And they're going to have to do that, I think, if they're going to get through the Big 12, in shape to potentially make the playoff.
Yeah, and Coach Whittingham is I think he drools over these long drives, but you're right. They haven't had the explosive plays that might be defining of a super team who can put the ball down the field whenever they want. Instead, they like that grinding it out type of a game plan, and certainly that for Kyle Whittingham, he loves that kind of style. But as you look across the teams that have won and lost so far, I think people look at a team like Texas and they look at Arch Manning, who has not looked good. Is there a way that Texas crawls back into that conversation of the national championship discussion, or is it just one of those things where you go, they've got to fix that kid at number 16 in the pocket back there before they have any kind of discussion about that?
Well, I think certainly they do need to get arch figured out. There's no doubt about that. But with the playoff, the way the playoff is, one loss right now doesn't, you're fine. Texas is fine for the playoff. They can afford probably another loss, and depending on who it comes to, they might even be able to afford 2 more losses, right? I could easily see a scenario where, a 3-loss team from the SEC gets in. But, yeah, they got to fix him. One other thing that is kind of important to that whole calculation is Notre Dame, right? Because if Notre Dame, they got 2 losses, it's going to be hard for Notre Dame to make the playoff. I think they probably got to win out. Their schedule is not very strong, but it's still hard to win 10 games in a row. And if Notre Dame doesn't make it, then there's an extra spot available, and that could be the 4th team in the SEC that has 3 losses. It could be a second team in the Big 12 or a second team in the ACC that's got 2 or 3 losses. It is a numbers game. There are 7 at-large spots, and if Notre Dame takes one of them, it gets really tight for the power conference at-large teams.
Wanted to check in with you on the Mountain West / Pac-12 right now. Some interesting storylines there. First, Utah State had a nice win over Air Force. They look like they're going to be better this year than we thought. Boise State seems to be not as good, obviously, as we thought. What have you seen so far that gives you any indication who might be the teams to beat in the Mountain West? Because it feels wide open right now.
It does feel wide open, and, that's another case of different disparity in schedules. Some teams have played more games than others. I'll tell you what, I think New Mexico's pretty good.
Yeah.
UCLA obviously has got a lot of problems, but the Lobos went to Ann Arbor, and that was a 10-point game in the Big House, like in the 4th quarter. And he is an excellent coach, Jason Eck. So I wouldn't be surprised if New Mexico's in it. Boise, Colorado State, they played well at Husky Stadium for 3 quarters. We'll see what Bronco does. I'm not sure Bronco's got enough players to kind of stay in it for the whole season. But the Mountain West actually looks pretty good, and it's had some good wins. Obviously, UNLV is going to be a factor. It should be a really entertaining conference this year based on what we've seen the first few weeks.
What's going on with Oregon State? We followed that program closely while Utah was in the Pac-12. They recruited this area heavily. There's some alumni here. To see what's happening right now with Oregon State, Washington State to a lesser degree, but why is Oregon State struggling so badly outside of the obvious things with dropping down from the Power 4 level?
Yeah, I'm not sure they got the right coach. Trent Bray had never been a head coach before. He 1 or 2 years as a coordinator. He's an alum, and they hired him quickly after Jonathan Smith left for Michigan State. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he's not quite ready for this. Kind of like there was evidence to suggest that Sean Foster was not ready for UCLA. So I think that's a big part of it. They got a good quarterback. Malik Murphy can play. That guy was at Texas and Duke, and that's the key, the starting piece, right? And he's pretty good compared to what Oregon State could expect. So I think a lot of it, honestly, is about coaching.
Jon Wilner, college football writer for Mercury News. You can also read his byline for the AP, and he's an AP Top 25 voter. John, thanks for being with us, man. We'll chat with you again, and good luck the rest of the season here as we all try to guess as to what these teams are going to shake out to be. Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for having me.
There you go.